Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew, and this is Sasquatchers. Now, Sasquatchers is a new podcast that I created to celebrate and investigate the paranormal. Um, I am a 35-year-old who is very intrigued by everything that I read or see involving ghosts, ghouls, goblins, aliens, demons, and everything that kind of falls into those categories. UFOs. It started when I was a child. Obviously, somebody that is around my age, we had the X Files growing up, and I can certainly recall at that young age seeing X Files reruns on, and that theme song and opening video just etched itself into my brain. And the aliens in the opening segment and the first episode being Area 51, it instilled upon me a fascination that just never went away. I can recall being in fourth grade, a young child, and I'm sleeping not with a light on, but next to one because for some reason, and I guess later on in life, I would realize this was called an anxiety disorder. But for some reason, I was convinced I was going to be abducted every single night. And I guess to my dismay now, as someone who's incredibly interested and would love to have been abducted, to my knowledge, I actually never was. It was an irrational fear, that was birthed from science fiction on television. Now, I would eventually, and I'm going to talk about it, have an experience with a UFO. This happened a few years ago. But before I get to that, I want to just keep adding some layers to this backstory. So, this podcast actually was created very quickly. I came up with the concept in the span of about a week and a half. And the reason that I had to come up with this was because I have a history of working in independent film, and it is nothing crazy. I'm not an actor who is on strike. I'm not a writer who is on strike. And I've certainly never directed anything of value or substance. But growing up, it was an intriguing thing that I wanted to try to do. And it was a fun pastime. Now, I've done a lot of crazy things to try to avoid becoming an adult. I was going to be a filmmaker. I was going to be a professional wrestler, which eventually I've done those things. But the one thing that I've always really wanted to do was get into podcasting. And my friends and I, who will be on this show, who have done many shows with me, I guess I'll call it failed attempt at a podcast prior to this, have always been with me along the way. And we were actually doing podcasts long before anybody even referred to them as podcasts. We were doing this in the early 2000s. We didn't even know what to call it. We called it internet radio. And right around the time that I discovered Art Bell, I was doing internet radio in the early 2000s. Now, one night, I had to have been about 15 years old. I always had trouble sleeping, and obviously, like any other teenager, the last thing I wanted to do was to go to sleep to wake up for school. So I would stay up late at night, I would turn on the radio, I would play PlayStation 2, Xbox, whatever. Every once in a while, read a book. I happened to be scrolling through the dial on the radio with my headphones on when I finally came across Coast to Coast AM. And I'll never forget the first episode that I heard was about demons. And immediately I was sucked in to this world of paranormal broadcast and fell in love with it. I'd listen to it every single night. And that eventually turned into a love of broadcasting in general. I really don't listen to music, and I haven't listened to music in such a long time because the art of talking and keeping your audience is something that has always intrigued me. And Art Bell was a guy who did it better than anybody. Art Bell could take any person and draw 4 hours of conversation out of them that was both compelling and listenable the entire time. So obviously he had many, many, many retirements. It's almost a meme or a joke at this point. But I continued to listen to Coast throughout all of the other hosts. And it is on now. But the world is so fractured as far as media goes. It's so much easier to try and find those shows that entertain you. So although I don't regularly keep up with Coast anymore, like so many other Art Bell fans, I have sought out the episodes that are available to us. Premier Audio owns the bulk of it. But he came back in, I want to say 2013 for a brief spell and did a show with satellite Sirius XM radio, and it was called Dark Matter. Well, Dark Matter only ran for about 6 weeks, and then there were issues, and Art left. I can't say exactly what those issues are. I could speculate. And not long after that, he came up with a show that in 2015 was such a breath of fresh air called Midnight in the Desert. And every other show that Art had done since Coast had a short lifespan, and it ran its course. It took a little longer than Dark Matter, but unfortunately, it ended with Art leaving the show, and the producer, Heather Wade, took over and did her best and, paved their own path. So I guess you might be wondering why on Sasquatchers have I been going on about Art Bell and Coast to Coast for almost 8 minutes. Now, here's why. A few weeks ago, I decided I was going to reach back into my bag of tricks. I was going to try to make a documentary. I wanted to tell the story of Art Bell, the broadcaster who intrigued me for 20 years of my life. And so I reached out to some Facebook groups and some of the old areas where you can find Art Bell fans. And I posted this idea, and I was met with a lot of enthusiasm. But it seemed like one thing that everybody all agreed on was this was going to be impossible. The audio is going to be impossible to get a hold of. Any videos or pictures from the family will be impossible to get a hold of. So I did my due diligence and I reached out and I spoke to members of the family, and I won't identify who, but it was essentially told to me that while they offer no ill will and encourage me to try, they don't want to participate, and that getting any kind of participation from Art's ex-wife or widow, I should say, is going to be impossible. Very, very protective of the legacy. And of course, why wouldn't she be? So at that point, I also reached out about the audio. Sirius XM for Dark Matter. I reached out to Premier Audio for Coast to Coast. And I got an email from the producer. I'm not going to name him. But I checked my email, and there it was. A phone number, a message saying, hey, give me a call. So for a brief second, I had a glimmer of hope. This was going to work out. If nothing else, I'll be able to get some access to the audio so that I can do a proper documentary about the broadcaster that Art Bell was. Because as intriguing as he was as a human being, the broadcaster, the guy that talked like this, the guy that could draw out a conversation for 4 hours about ghosts, ghouls, goblins. Well, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to present. That's what I wanted to work with, and that's the movie that I wanted to make. So I take this number, I put it in my phone, and I call, and I'm giddy with excitement. All right, there's no other way to describe it. I have that feeling in the pit of my stomach that feels somewhat like butterflies. He answers, thanks me for returning a message, and then explains, we don't license anything. It's just a matter of fact. It's company wide. That's not the answer that we want to hear, but they don't license anything. Period. Well, thank you for your time, and that's the end of that. But there was so much enthusiasm for this project that it made me start to wonder, well, what would Art do in that situation? And I highly doubt he would just turn over and go away and wait to die. He would fight, and he would figure out how to get something going. So the effort immediately started to turn towards this podcast. Now, what is this podcast going to be? Well, it's called Sasquatchers, so it's going to have elements of Sasquatch, Yeti, Bigfoot. If you've seen any of my social media, you've seen that there's going to be some comedy involved. Beyond that, I want it to be something that is open-ended. I want to present cases of the unknown. I want to talk to people who have had experiences with the supernatural, the paranormal, with ufology. I want to be a platform so that people can come and have long-form conversation. It can be therapeutic. I want to have panels of co-hosts and friends on who can help me push out a really fun, hilarious episode that leans more into comedy than anything else. You're listening to an episode right now that I consider to be an introduction. It is not always going to be Andrew here discussing Andrew things. I will, however, certainly push out news, and I will certainly push out minis where if you want to listen to Andrew talk, you certainly will be able to do that. Today's episode was going to originally be 2 minis, and I decided against that because so many people push out content without worrying about the quality. So today I wanted to just put out something that was quality. Prove that I can sit here and that I can have a conversation, and hopefully you'll want to listen to it. So we will be doing tons of things. Video content. I've reached out to local stores who will allow us to go and podcast from their location, film content in their location, and what that does is it allows us an avenue to go look at cool paranormal and Bigfoot things, make a video, and the most important thing to me is giving everyone who shares this hobby a platform. And that's what this is all about. Now, does that mean every single thing that I hear I'm going to take hook, line, and sinker? No. Sometimes people have a BS meter, and a BS meter becomes full, and you just got to call it. There are hoaxes, there are people with ill will, and we can't sit here with bated breath the whole time either. When it comes time to call BS, like the great Art Bell, we will call BS. So that's kind of the mission statement. I wanted to go ahead and let you know that today's episode will finish with a myth that has started to really pick up steam around here where I live, which is I'll call it the west central area of Pennsylvania. So after I tell you about this brief encounter that I had, I'm going to get into this, which is a separate thing. But full disclosure, was going to do 2 episodes, and 1 episode specifically about this other subject. But I want to make sure that you've pressed play and that you're not just listening to me ramble about what I want this show to be. And I want to give you something of substance. So in a moment, I'm going to talk about a local Lantern Man lore myth that's happening here in West Central PA. And people have been talking about it. This is not something that I'm hearing just from coworkers or people at the bar. This went viral, everybody, okay? So I'll let that sink in for a minute. Now I want to tell you about that kid who was terrified of being abducted by aliens, who grew up and eventually saw something in the sky. So it had to have been about 5 years ago at this point. I was working as a mentor in a home health company, but I had a client who was more along the lines of a behavior, and he just needed some guidance, and he eventually was able to go on and flourish and become something everybody's very proud of. But one night, and it was on all nights, 4th of July, we're at a party, and it's campfire, and it's just your usual 4th of July, fireworks, cookouts, hot dogs, food, that kind of stuff. So we're walking back to his house, and this light just kind of starts to come up over the tree line. And my immediate thought, being the 4th of July, is, hey, check it out. There's some fireworks. Why don't we stop and watch these? So we're walking down the street right in the middle of town. And we stop and we look at this light. And what it is, I can only describe as a glowing orb. Comes up over the tree line. I'm thinking it's going to explode. It's going to pop. Fireworks everywhere. But it just stays. Just kind of hovers over the tree line. And we look at each other and we're like, what is going on here? What is this? That's not a firework. Now, to this day, I can't tell you what it was. But I can tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't a firework. So as we're watching it, it then separates and creates 2 orbs that begin to kind of hover around each other and float. And not long after that, the one that it had split into then also splits into a 3rd. So now we are staring at 3 glowing orbs just dancing with each other over the tree line. And we're in awe. We're in shock. And it just doesn't stop. The ballet of lights just keeps going and going and going to the point we realized that we had been watching this for we don't even know how long. So we start to almost walk backwards so that we can get back to his house in a timely manner, but not miss what we're watching. And of course, I'd taken my phone out. And I am videoing. I have Snapchat going. And I'm sending snaps. I have a really good friend who cares so much about the paranormal. It was like the foundation of our friendship. So I'm sending her these snaps. We get back to his house. He has a roommate. And the roommate had a mentor with him as well. And we get to the house and we're standing outside of the house. And I'm not happy with my phone. I don't think my phone is capturing the moment the way that it should be captured. So I run in. I'm talking to my coworker. And I'm like, you're not going to believe what's out there. But what kind of phone do you have? There's something out there in the sky. You should come look at it. And her response blew my mind. Her response, she called out to the other client that we had, and she said, "It's back! It's back!" They had seen it too. So we all go out, and we're standing outside, and we're just watching these lights dance with each other. And it had to have been 20 minutes had elapsed at this point. And then finally, just as they had separated, these lights come together. And they eventually form one singular orb of light again. And then it just goes away. I couldn't tell you where it went, but it went away. So I do my due diligence, and I reach out to MUFON. Anybody who isn't familiar with this stuff, MUFON is an organization that investigates sightings of anything in the air that is of unknown origin. And their goal is not to investigate what we would call a UFO or perhaps an alien spacecraft. Rather, their goal is to find out just what it was in the sky at that moment that isn't an alien or a UFO. Their goal is to provide actual scientific logistics to your event. So I reach out to MUFON, and MUFON, they do their due diligence, and they reach back to me, and they had zero explanation. There were no airplanes, there were no drones, there was nothing that they could put any reason behind these lights happening at the moment that we saw them. Now, it wasn't just myself who saw them. There were 3 other people in the vicinity who verify this. So what we saw, we don't know. But I do know that I felt vindicated when I saw it. You know, I saw these lights up in the sky, and to this day, I was never once scared of it. You know, that boy who was afraid of being abducted, well, that boy wasn't there anymore. I was intrigued. I was fascinated. I felt a warm feeling when I saw this. I felt like I was meant to see it and that no harm was going to be done by whatever it was, and that it wasn't just some drone or something else that we were looking at. You know, is this like a spiritual encounter? No, I don't think so. Not at all. But spiritually, I felt compassion inside for whatever was happening. And that has kept me company for 5 years now. That warmth. I know that whatever it was meant no harm, and that I was safe, and that maybe perhaps it knew we were watching. And that's why we got a 20-minute dramatic showing of sky ballet between lights. But that is essentially the only thing that's happened to me in my now almost 36 years of life. And I'm often jealous, and I have sought out adventure in the paranormal. I have gone to haunted houses. I have tried paranormal investigations. I have done all of these things that yielded no results whatsoever. But the one night, I'm just going about my business, it finally happens. And now it's been 5 years, and I'm still waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for the next. And if that never happens again, I'll be sad, but I'll also know that I'm vindicated because it did happen, and I know what I saw. And because I know that each and every one of you who have had an experience Also know what you saw. So when I reach out to you or you reach out to me and we have conversations, I know that my BS meter that I talked about earlier isn't going to fill up because I know that the truth is you saw what you saw, and I love every second of it. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about what you saw. So please, anyone listening, anyone who shares this with me, do not be afraid to reach out to me because I believe you. Now, on to the Lantern Man. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory about what the folklore of the Lantern Man is. Okay, now the Lantern Man is actually a British myth or spirit, I should say, that started as a will-o'-the-wisp or will-o'-wisp lore. And basically what that is it's an atmospheric ghost. It's a light seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs, swamps, marshes. The phenomenon is known in much of European folklore, but has transcended that area. It's also called a hinky punk and is said to mislead travelers by resembling a flickering lamp or lantern. Now, I actually, prior to hearing about this Lantern Man outside of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, knew nothing about the Lantern Man. These wisps of light that lure people to certain doom had eluded me forever. So I had to do a little bit of research before I decided to, press that record button. Now, I found an article written by a man named Daniel Parkinson, and this was published in April 20th of 2010, and it was updated December 15th, 2018. I want to read you a couple of excerpts from it before I get deep into the Johnstown situation. Okay, so Daniel says, the Lantern Man is one version of the common will-o'-the-wisp or jack-o'-lantern phenomena within Norfolk and the haunted fens. The supernatural belief has many variations throughout Britain. The Lantern Man was always thought to be dangerous, and in many accounts would attack whoever came into its vicinity, rather than the usual role of most will-o'-the-wisps who lure travelers to treacherous areas. So right there, you see that a Lantern Man is a little different than its counterparts because the wisps tend to lure you into an area where something whimsically terrible could happen. However, the Lantern Man seems to lure you so that it can harm you. All right, the article continues. The visualization of a man carrying a lantern is also more formal than usual, although it was still believed to be a form of marsh gas. A last resort to stand a chance of survival was to fall on the ground and hold your breath, which is telling if the belief was related to noxious gases escaping from the mire. So even all of these years ago, they were coming up with some kind of logical explanation. The Lantern Man is mentioned in the 1900 copy of Eastern Counties magazine, where a novel way of escaping the Lantern Man's clutches is outlined. If two men were on the opposite sides of a field and the Lantern Man approached, whistling would draw its attention, and in this way, two travelers could whistle in turn, and if they were far enough apart, lure the Lantern Man to and fro until they escaped safely. So now it's established that one way to get away or to confuse this sprite is by whistling. And that essentially all that does is create a noise diversion so that it then goes over there so that you can flee. So that's not even very, it's not compelling to your safety. So these things have occurred in the United States and are often called spook lights, ghost lights, or even just simple orbs can be attributed to the Lantern Man. Okay, so that's the backstory. That's what I read this morning before pressing the record button. So now that we are all a little informed of what this thing could be, let me tell you about what's going on in Johnstown, folks. Okay, so I guess this is actually closer. This is Somerset County in Boswell. Okay, the population of this town has to be about 50 people if you want pure honesty. All right, so it's a small town roughly 30 minutes outside of Johnstown, okay? All right, there have been sightings of the Lantern Man reported over the last few years, and all of the sightings seem to have occurred at or adjacent to the Quemahoning Dam. And all reports are consistent in description of the Lantern Man's appearance. Everybody seems to see the same thing. The appearance is said to be a rotten, skeletal zombie with bits of flesh and a strong yellow appearance. I can only surmise that appearance is based off of geology. You know, there's a lot of algae in a marsh. It's been dead, decaying, or that it's a spirit, so it's glowing. Something is creating this yellow appearance that every single person seems to agree upon. Okay, now all of these appearances have also been characterized by a glowing red light emitted by a lantern. You know, you're out there, you're in the woods, you're by this dam, and you just see this glowing, floating, WTF is that over there? Well, it's a lantern, and it's glowing, and now it has you in its sights. What happens next? Well, those close enough to it have said that they could hear gurgling, moans, groans. Some have reported seeing it as a corporeal solid being, as real as you or I right in front of them. Or as real as the dog right next to me making all kinds of noise while I'm trying to record. Others have also described the encounter with the being as transparent. So that's where things start to kind of differ based off of appearance. You know, some people see it as a solid biological creature, and then others tend to lean into this is a glowing sprite, spirit kind of situation. Most sightings have taken place at the dam, which, by the way, in Boswell, this dam is just referred to by the dam. So they take place at the dam, which seems to indicate to me that there is some connection between the Lantern Man and the dam, right? That only makes sense. So what do we know about the dam? The dam was built by the manufacturer's water company to supply water for the Cambria Iron Company's works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Construction began in 1910 and was completed in 1913. So the dam, while aging, is not that old. It created a reservoir that is roughly 5 miles long and 2 miles wide at its widest place. It drains into the Stony Creek River and thence into the Kiski-Conemaugh system. The reservoir reportedly covers the American Indian village of, and let me make sure I'm saying it right, Kitkenapaling, which was referred to in records of Christopher Gist. Christopher Gist was an explorer in the area. So right away, that jumps out at me. This is a large, man-made mass of water that was created on Indian land. Now, that seems to be the number one rule is don't build on Native American land. Each and every haunting that's adjacent to anything Native American always comes back to you made spirits angry. because you put something there that shouldn't have been there. So, the Lantern Man. Is this a Native American spirit? Is this something that Native Americans warded off and then came back because of the industrial complex of America? Now, in April 1917, it gets better. A special police force was stationed at the Hickston Run and Quemahoning reservoirs as a precaution against possible plots to cripple the great Cambria Steel Company's plant during World War I, according to local newspapers. So then what do we have there? There's a special police force station there. There are people with nefarious intent trying to cripple our ability to help the Army with industrial creations. The dam and reservoir was sold by Bethlehem Steel Corporation to Cambria Somerset Authority in 2000, which now operates both for recreation and industrial water supply. They offer fishing, boating, camping, and an occasional whitewater rafting are among the activities available. Upgraded release valves in 2010 substantially increased discharges from the reservoir to improve whitewater rafting on the Stony Creek River. So now you have a lot of people there having fun, doing things with their families, doing water sports. All right, it's a rec center. It's an area where people with very little to do in their town can all go and have fun. So that to me is the main reason why the Lantern Man is seen at this dam. Now, the journalist, the investigator in me, I want to go ahead and I want to look at every single possible avenue or scenario surrounding this area. I want to go ahead and I want to look at disappearances and deaths. And I've done that. I've done my due diligence. But something bothers me about it. Okay, I need you to understand that while I did find that there have been drownings and disappearances, the ages of these victims make it so that I, as a father, do not want to speculate about them. So if this is something that interests you and you want to, delve deeper into it, by all means, pop onto your Google machine and take a look. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it isn't suspicious or that it might not be interesting to try to entwine the two. But I think it would be in poor taste. So I'm going to avoid doing that, at least for episode 1. Let's kind of keep things conventional. The area surrounding the dam is thick forest, and I presume a reason that the sightings tend to happen at the dam, otherwise already stated, is the thick forest just doesn't have anything to do, during the summer seasons. You might have some hikers, but beyond that's about it. Sightings have occurred in the forest. It isn't an isolated phenomenon, but the dam seems to be, for one reason or another, the central spot. And it's not just a summer thing. All right, sightings also happen year round. Not just people using the dam, hunters in November, December, people driving in the area in snowmobiles in the dead of winter. They've seen this thing. So it's there. It's out there. And despite the fact that the myth falls, around wetlands and swamps and marshes and bogs, and this thing at this dam certainly qualifies for that, it has branched out. The sightings and the discourse, and this is where things get fun, really took off in the year 2020. when the Lantern Man hit mainstream. And when I say mainstream, folks, I mean that. Going viral after being caught in a dash cam video that was sent to local paranormal investigation group out here, who then shared the video online, okay? It went viral. These videos exist, and I will share them on my social media pages. When you see the link for this, you will have already seen the links for the Lantern Man videos. All right, now the video validated so many of the locals because they'd been reporting this thing for years without any real knowledge of what was going on. They didn't have any of that. They didn't have evidence. I'll just put it like that. Okay, this is no longer somebody's word. This is something that happened on camera. Something that paranormal investigators would die for. Something that skeptics ask for. And it happened almost 4 years ago. So you got to ask yourself, if this thing went viral 4 years ago, well, I mean, why haven't we heard about it? You know, what is it just not that big? Are we too complicated as far as our consumption goes? Is the media, frenzy that we deal with on a daily basis, causing us not to see this? I heard this from a coworker. I didn't see this video. So how could something that locally is so much part of the zeitgeist that has gone viral on the internet be so isolated to whom knows anything about it? That, to me, is an intriguing factor in all of this that I can't explain. So, yes, it has been seen elsewhere. Not nearly as often, but again, the dam is the dam. That's what people do. So as far as that goes, the video is there. The video is posted. As you can see in the dash cam, it's night. The car is traveling down a road that is adjacent to the dam. And you can see him walking. Now it's very brief. I am told that they did not see this while they drove past it. And it wasn't until later viewings of the footage shot, because they had almost hit some deer, and one of the deer had a huge rack. Okay, now some of you listeners out there might not be hunters, you might not be sportsmen, you might not know the importance of a big rack, at least on a deer. I'm sure a lot of you know the importance of a big rack. But they went back. They wanted to see these deer. They wanted to make mental note of it. They wanted to know where they were for future hunting purposes. And to their dismay, to their amazement, to their jargon, they see this creature walking, lantern in hand. An appearance that seems to coincide with all reports. It certainly looks skeletal and fleshy to me. So, what do you think? Is this a sprite that somehow made its way from England? Is this a angry Native American spirit seeking vengeance for their resting place being thwarted so that locals could build a dam? Or is this something else? Are your BS meters filling up? Are you about to call BS? Is this a hoax? It's one dash cam video that I have. It is not my video. I've shared it. This is from the Quemahoning Paranormal people. They're the ones who made this go viral. I'd love to know what you think. Because until further investigation, I can only go by what we think, what I think. I can only speak for myself in this show and Sasquatchers, and what I think is we have a video that shows something that is consistent with years of sightings of a paranormal creature. There is something here that needs further investigation. Bare minimum, further investigation. Something has happened here. There are other videos of the emitted red light from the lantern. You can find them. These are on YouTube. So what is this? What is going on? Who is in the woods? And what do they want? Now, this person driving obviously wasn't victimized. The people posting videos of red lights floating through the wilderness have not been victimized. They were not lured by this light. The moans, the gurgles, if anything, are a warning sign. That is the discrepancy here against the original lore. If folklore is to believe, this creature is luring victims and it is doing harm to them. So why are these people in the woods right now by this dam driving past this creature? We'll call it a creature for now. Still around to post videos about it. That's the intriguing part. Think about that for a minute. Perhaps, although grotesque in appearance, the Lantern Man is a warning. Our own local Mothman, if you will. Perhaps those deaths I alluded to earlier are unfortunate events that the Lantern Man may have tried to bear some kind of warning against happening. I don't know. And I don't know if we will ever know. But that is where it stands right now. I want all of you listeners out there, because I know there are many. Because I know, first of all, that I am awesome. And second of all, I know that the footprints of the paranormal are left all over the world. This is one thing that the human race has agreed upon since the human race has come to exist. It's on paintings in caves. Sure, there's discourse. Sure, there's skeptics. But to those believers, this is something that we have to cherish, to hold on to relate to become friends over. That's why conventions exist. I want all of you out there listening right now to think about this. And get back to me. Reach out to me. Let me hear your thoughts. Let's blow up the social medias about it. Let's do each and everything that we can to create awareness. Until next time, thanks for squatching.